What's up, guys? Jay Martin here, investor and CEO of Cambridge House. And my guest today is Jeff Booth. Jeff Booth is the author of a book called The Price of Tomorrow. I've had Jeff on the show a few times, but not recently. Now, The Price of Tomorrow was a book that took the macro finance world by storm in 2020. Definitely became the best-selling macro finance book of the year and the most influential macro finance book of many preceding years. You'll find it on the must-read lists of so many great finance personalities like Raoul Pal, Lynn Alden, et cetera, and many, many more. Now, before he became an author, Jeff was an entrepreneur, and he still is an entrepreneur. But prior to writing The Price of Tomorrow, he was the founder of a company called BuildDirect, which he founded in his garage, grew to a $500 million market cap. Then he wrote The Price of Tomorrow. Today, he is the founder, co-founder, or advisor to about 9 or 10 super high growth tech companies. So very, very smart individual. Now, where we landed today with this discussion was on the crypto market. Specifically, what's going on in the DeFi space that really matters. We talk about cryptocurrencies, altcoins, NFTs, Metaverse possibilities, all this stuff, kind of interesting. But, at the core, what we got back to is a very simple approach, right? Jeff outlined the why to consider Bitcoin. Now, this may be old news to you, especially if you watch Money My Peers channels or my channel. But look, I would encourage you to watch this because it's important to revisit your why, right? A lot of the why behind our investment decisions, not mine, hopefully, but behind a lot of people is because other people are doing it, right? We get trapped in this FOMO, this sentiment wave, and we do things because the crowd's moving that way. And that's a horrible why, all right? Now, Jeff gets into one of the whys for Bitcoin being inflation. And this is fun to talk about because the inflation game is a game that's been played for the majority of my life. And if you played that game, you were rewarded, meaning if you borrowed money to buy an asset, you were rewarded for that, right? Let's think about real estate, for example. If you bought a house in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you could have borrowed money, leveraged yourself to the hilt and borrowed money you absolutely could not afford. But time proved to reward you for that, right? Because you're able to pay that asset back in future devalued currency. So this is the game that has worked. It's been like the retirement plan for the last 40 years. And Jeff thinks that game will eventually change. Now, we're going to see increased inflation. That's what he thinks. But eventually, that's the microwave. The microwave is increased inflation for the next maybe 10 years or so. But on top of that, there's a tsunami of deflation that will eventually eat that wave. That's the back of technology eating everything because technology endeavors to give you more for less, right? It's by nature deflationary, right? It makes things more efficient and cheaper. Now, why this is significant is because inflation does a few things, like at the community level, right? At the person level. And it creates natural wealth disparity. There's no really way around that. Let's think about the game of Monopoly, for example. We're all familiar with the game of Monopoly, right? Everybody starts on a level playing field. We all have the same amount of properties and cash. But as the game goes on, for some reason my camera's just all blurry. As the game goes on, some people acquire more valuable properties, and over the course of the game, eventually all the cash siphons to those individuals, right? It's a winner-take-all scenario. That's the inflation game played out over many, many decades because as the price of assets increases, the obstacle to acquire those assets increases as well. So the percentage of people that can no longer acquire assets and play the inflation game grows, right? Whereas those who played it successfully, i.e. those who acquired assets, continue to get more and more wealthy in dollar terms as their asset increases in value, right? And so you have a growing number of people who can access the game and the small percentage of people that did getting increasingly wealthy, and it's not their fault, right? Often we get fingers pointed that it's the rich's fault that they're so rich, and it's not. It's a matter of fiscal policy, right? This is the consequence of that. But it doesn't matter because we're seeing this right now, looking around the globe at the variety of expressions of civil unrest from people who just woke up and they looked at the Monopoly board and they're like, what the hell happened here? How did I get so far behind? We're all playing the same game. Somebody must have cheated, and they want to point the finger, and that's when things go south, okay? So that is why Jeff calls Bitcoin the life raft, right? This is the life raft you can jump to because this scenario will eventually, probably, usually does, get pretty ugly, right? It typically ends in war or revolution. Hopefully it doesn't this time. Hopefully we find a peaceful outcome, but in case we don't, Jeff encourages everybody to have a few of your eggs in the Bitcoin basket. Not all of them, just a few of them. Just have a horse in that race. And I think he's right. Now here's the thing about investing in the crypto market. often it's done with a ton of enthusiasm and laser eyes and go all in and diamond hands and all of this stuff. I don't encourage that. What I encourage is sustainability and consistency. What can you do consistently? That's how you should approach any investment idea, including Bitcoin. For example, I wasn't early to Bitcoin at all. I started investing in Bitcoin 2 years ago. I dollar cost average in every 2 weeks without fail. I don't care what the price is. I slowly and assuredly acquire a position in that asset. As a result, right, I never miss the money that I've pushed that direction because it's immaterial. But 2 years later, it's actually a very material part of my wealth picture, right? That's the advantage of consistent dollar cost averaging. But consistency is the key, all right? It's just like fitness, right? You can go and everybody wants to hit the market and find that winner that'll change their life, and it doesn't work like that, right? Nothing works like that. Some people get lucky sometimes, but I guarantee you, they probably don't keep the cash. However, like think about fitness, you hit the gym really hard for a month, you don't really, you might get some results, you'll probably just get sore. But if you hit the gym every 2 days for the rest of your life, those results compound. That's when you get real progress. Investing is just the same. Think about when you approach your decision, can I do this consistently over a long period of time? And I benefit when I approach my decisions that way. Anyways, here is Jeff Booth. I hope you enjoy it. Before I jump into this conversation, the cash from this YouTube channel is now donated to an organization called Zero Ceiling. Zero Ceiling's mission is to end youth homelessness. The way they do this is by giving at-risk urban youth the opportunity to relocate to beautiful wilderness areas and then surround them with just positive influences and career training, etc. Check them out if you're curious, Zero Ceiling. If you prefer to listen to my content as opposed to watch it, you can find me wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search for The Jay Martin Show. All right, here's Jeff Booth. Enjoy. I assemble the smartest people I can think of or reach out to carry that conversation, and that's exactly what I've done today. Please give my panel a round of applause. Welcome. All right, what's up, guys? Jay Martin here, investor and CEO of Cambridge House, and I'm joined right now by Jeff Booth, who is, among many other things, the author of one of my favorite books, The Price of Tomorrow. And Jeff, I've had you on the YouTube channel a bunch, but haven't had you on the podcast, so welcome. Really glad that you could make the time.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Great to be here. Great to see you again.
Likewise, yeah. And we were supposed to do this in person, but it's close. Next time. So for anyone who's not familiar with who you are and how you spend your time, can we just start there, really high level? Who is Jeff Booth and how do you spend your time?
Just that, hey? Technology entrepreneur. Spend my time mostly investing or boards advising different technology companies. So on the boards of quite a few different technology companies, or owner, co-founder of quite a few different technology companies. So that's where I would spend the majority of my time.
And how many in the portfolio right now between companies you've co-founded or sit on the board of?
I think 9 in 9 boards or co-founded, maybe 10 boards are co-founded. So that's and then obviously lots of other investments in technology companies. I probably see 300 companies a year, maybe more than that.
Right. Yes. Okay. And for background, the way I met Jeff was when you founded a company called BuildDirect from your garage or your basement, one of the two, I believe.
Yep, basement.
Yeah, basement. Yeah, built that into a company that generated, am I correct, $500 million in sales?
No, it was at the peak. It was $120 million in revenue.
$500 million market cap.
Exactly. Yeah. Got
it. Okay. Yeah. There we are. After that, you authored The Price of Tomorrow, which became like the most read book in macro finance of 2020. I read it 2.5 times, and now, so you're kind of, from my standpoint, living the dream. Sitting on the board of a variety of like really diverse technology companies. Very cool. Some that I'm a shareholder of in the vertical farming space. I love the food tech sector, and you're doing some cool things there. So let's jump into a couple of topics here. In the past, we've spoken a lot about just like general monetary policy and some of the challenges that you view and you address in your book, right? I follow you on Twitter, and I think you've written some interesting stuff recently about Bitcoin becoming a better risk asset or hedge, safe haven asset than real estate. And so that's the interesting place to start. I'd love to start there. So walk my audience through how that shift functions, because for my whole life, the trade has been, borrow money, buy real estate, retire on that equity, right? And you think that could be compromised. So talk to me about why.
Yeah, and I think for people that haven't read the book or haven't understood what's happening right now, I think we probably should do a quick start there, and
Please.
then go if that's okay.
Please.
And just these concepts are really hard to wrap our brains around because they're different than we've ever experienced. And so when you say, why could real estate be a bad investment versus Bitcoin, I'm sure a whole bunch of your audience is like, come on, I'm not listening anymore. This is ridiculous. And so it's just important to say we live in we live in a world where advancing technology should be freeing our time. And that advancing technology is exponential in nature, and it's going to move into artificial intelligence and robotics and merge into. And when that happens, the marginal cost of production falls to almost zero, and things become free, or they become ever increasingly cheaper as competition races in to deliver us more value, and we use that value. That's actually how a company creates value. They give more value to society by automating and bringing technology. Some of the best investments that I've made or founding companies is a result of giving more value to society that drives that. So that is the macro framework we are all living in, but we're measuring it from a system that must raise prices. So the credit market, if you allowed, because our entire system is based on credit, if you allowed credit to fall, deflation to happen, natural deflation to happen, the credit would keep unwinding to the ground. So you have governments all over the world, and it doesn't really matter where they print money, but printing money, essentially diluting the money to pretend asset prices or to make prices go up. What's really happening is the measuring stick is being manipulated. But we measure everything by that measuring stick, so we don't see it. So you have these two forces colliding into each other that will accelerate and accelerate and accelerate. Governments cannot stop printing, because if they do, in fact, they have to exponentially increase it. Otherwise, you'll have a deflationary spiral. And so in that, let's attach that to real estate. And so the reason real estate prices have gone up is because of that printing. And we might not see it because, and if you looked at the last 20 years to offset technology's gains, you've stimulated economies before COVID. You stimulated economies by $185 trillion to grow GDP by 46 trillion. And so we often don't question the monetary system we live in. We get focused on a part of the system. And in this case, let's use real estate as a part of the system. And people don't ask themselves, would my real estate have gone up without $185 trillion of stimulus? They think real estate goes up forever. And so now carry that forward. If there's not more stimulus, real estate will crash and crash badly. And so you have more and more, but right now that people know that there's more stimulus coming. So they're levering, essentially trying to protect their money by levering into real estate, so their money isn't devalued, and levering more and more and more. And the beneficiaries, people who have more real estate, are winning that game more because rents go up further, society is left out. But yeah, the other side of society moves to populist governments who then try to take that back. And because your real estate is inside a country, inside the monetary policy of the country, when that revolution or whatever redistribution comes, it's taken back because there's more people without than people with. And so at some point, you can question, is it next year, is it the year after? But at some point, real estate doesn't become a safe haven in that. And if you just zoom out to places where Venezuela used to be the fourth richest nation by GDP. Look at it today, and would you want to own real estate there? or look at Lebanon today, or look at Turkey, what's happening to Turkey today. And so what ends up happening is once you start to have currency failures because of the manipulation and because of the change to the change to the social contract of society, most of the people left out either take it back through force, through revolution, or it's captured in text in a totally different manner. So if you now compare what's happening today, that underneath kind of the foundation of money is being broken. And what would be a safe haven out of that? And you need a different measuring stick that's measuring that whole system. And that's what actually Bitcoin is. So it's a system that cannot be manipulated. And if you measured your wealth by Bitcoin, what you would see is every single asset price, every single price in the world is falling by Bitcoin standards. But we're measuring the world by a fiat money standard. So we think our prices are rising. So the natural market actually looks like what's happening on Bitcoin.
Yes. Okay. And that's important context, right? Like relativity is really important when we look at the price of the assets that we hold in our wealth picture, right? Because you're absolutely right. So to recap some of this, like when you say we're in a credit-based system, it's a debt-based system that works really well as long as we're in an inflationary environment, because we can borrow some cash, we can buy an asset and pay that asset back in a future, therefore devalued currency, because the value of that currency has been inflated away, right? As we increase the money supply, same amount of goods we're purchasing with that. What's so interesting about this to me is there's always like a few cycles at play, right? There's the near-term cycles and maybe more macro longer-term cycles. And right now, if I heard you correctly, and you can tell me if I'm off base, we're playing an inflationary game, a lot of us in the market, right? Because we're seeing inflation immediately in front of us, right? And that's the short-term trend, the near-term cycle, whatever you want to call that. But if we're thinking in terms of like 2 to 3 years, that game's probably going to work out just fine for anybody who's, planning to generate wealth off of inflation. The longer-term trend that's going to eventually eat that is that technology eventually eats everything. And technology is by definition deflationary, because technology endeavors to give you more for less, as you said, right? And as this continues to eat our world as we know it, the deflationary tsunami will eat the inflationary wave, correct?
Correct. But it's actually worse than that because going back to real estate, for example, or we get comfortable in the world we live in and we don't question outside that world. The goldfish has no idea that there's stars.
100%.
And they met, and again, measuring that system from that world. And so you have to zoom out from that world to see what's happening and what could happen here. People used to say, take real estate for an example. Would you want to own real estate in Detroit? And oh no, that city died because the auto industry moved. Well, go look at San Francisco today versus 2 years ago. The hub of what people were talking about with the hub of technology. Everyone's moving there. It's a total. Go look at it today, and people robbing high street stores. The streets look terrible. There's nothing they can do about it. It's a total mess. So real estate in that is starts to collapse. In that because the society fabric breaks down out of this same thing. Now, you can't move your real estate once it looks like that. You're stuck to a system. And if you zoom out even further, if you look at how inflationary monetary systems collapse, and if you look at to Germany in the 30s, inflationary monetary system brought in Hitler. Hitler turned a populace against the people with wealth.
Yeah.
Why didn't the people with wealth move when they saw it coming?
Well, these things happen incrementally, right? 1 millimeter at a time.
The goldfish in the bowl. They don't notice everything that's happening, but signposts are everywhere. But worse than that, all of the people in Germany, the wealthy people in Germany, all of their assets were in Germany.
Right.
and they made their and they were getting richer and richer because rents were going up. They were protected against inflation, somewhat protected against inflation, because they held the assets, and that protection doesn't last, because there's a negative externality to a huge part of the population that comes and takes it back, and you have these societal breakdowns, and you have these resets of currencies, and so you have to, whether you like Bitcoin, whether you don't like Bitcoin, I would say for anybody listening to this, I implore you to learn more about it and get off zero. Just get off zero.
Get off zero.
And so you start learning what it really is.
When you say get off zero, you mean have a non-zero position in Bitcoin.
Non-zero position.
Own some.
So don't own it on an exchange. Own it on a hard wallet, and learn why that's so important. You may not just save your family, but you may, by doing so, also bring a whole bunch of people over the bridge and help with you.
So you mentioned the negative externality, and thinking this through, it's interesting because the inflation game, own the asset, generate wealth off the inflated value of the asset, because we measure value relative to the dominant currency. Right now it's US dollars. And it's a good strategy. It's been a good strategy for my whole life. It's still a winning strategy, perceived to be today. But as that game proceeds forward, first of all, you mentioned like winners and losers in this, because if you own the asset, you feel like you're winning. If you don't, you feel like you're losing. But every day, the value of that asset increases. I'm a homeowner, and I'm benefiting from this right now. I live in a town 45 minutes outside of a major city. These are the hotspots that are blowing up right now because people want to be close to, but not in a city. And so we're looking at our home value like, holy smokes, we never saw this coming. But what that really means to me is there's more and more barriers to entry for those who want to get in the asset game, right? And so that obstacle from between the winners and the losers, I mean, when I say that, just, those that own assets and those that don't, it's becoming harder and harder to see how you could enter that winner's circle by acquiring an asset, because the value is just every day becoming more and more out of reach, right?
So, and again, these concepts, because we live in this monetary system that we don't measure the abuse of that. Inflation is theft. Nobody votes for inflation.
Right.
We believe that there must be inflation. We actually believe a productive society requires inflation, and it's simply untrue. So we believe we build a monetary system based on theft. We don't question the theft itself. We question the rate of theft. 2% theft is okay.
Right.
5% is bad. But it's actually, it's mind numbing that nobody questions, is a productive economy, does it require a theft built into it? Because that theft has a loser on the other side. Now, to visualize what's happening, it just simplify it, and you say, take a Monopoly board. And what ends up happening in Monopoly. A game of chance. And if you're lucky and you land on the right things early, you collect more properties.
Yeah.
And as the game goes around and around and around, it's a positive feedback loop for the property owners and a negative feedback loop for the non-property owners.
Yeah.
So their life gets harder and harder as they go around the board, and they can't pay their rents anymore. And then eventually somebody kicks over the game because they get so frustrated, and pieces fly everywhere, or the game resets and everybody gets another chance. Now imagine a game. You and me. I have lots of real estate. And imagine a game that can never end. It just keeps on going, and people all have all these assets. And if you have one house and I have 10 or 20 or 100, my magnitude of win is so much more than you. And if you don't have a house, that feedback effect that goes around this. Now imagine that game going around and around and around, and you're designing a system to be able to ensure those people that have the real estate have it forever, and it keeps moving up. And you're ensuring the negative feedback loop from the bottom of the population as well. So now the bottom of the population, They go past go, and $200 doesn't get them around the board, and they're living on the street. And so what do they do? What do politicians do? I know. Let's print more money and let's give them $400 to push prices up higher, so they can't get around the board. And you have this, and so you these negative externalities, both positive and negative externalities, keep feeding back until the game resets in a different way. And normally that game, if you look around the world through a long history arc of history lens, normally that game resets through revolution and war. My hope, my hope is, and that's why I've become a very vocal or a proponent of Bitcoin and an advocate of Bitcoin, is it is the only thing I've seen, and I it's not that I don't have an open mind to others. It is the only thing I've seen that can get us to the other side, into that stops what's going to come naturally from this system.
Yeah, I hope you're right. It's, because what you're describing is like the origin of dissent, right? You're right. And we've watched this over the last 10 years, the rise of populism, as people essentially wake up and they look at the monopoly board and they're like, what the hell happened here? How did I get so far behind? And or the other side, take the other side, or the other side, when those people rise up and they riot, they break windows, or they rob. What does the other side do? The wealthy side, they actually empower government more. Of course.
To hire more police force,
protect the game,
able to protect themselves.
Yeah, of course.
So government grows and grows and grows, and as government grows and grows and grows, your individual rights and freedoms are taken away by that growth. So that's exactly what happens. Yeah,
well, I mean, we're all in the game of self-preservation to a degree, right? We're going to look out for our families, look out for our well-being, and no matter what end of the game you're on, at the end of the day, you might unknowingly push ethics aside because you're going to take care of those around you, right? You're going to go for self-preservation.
So that's a really important point, and I covered it in the book as well. So if you think about game theory, and you think about how you think about things, we think about ourselves first. If you look at a photograph of a whole bunch of people, you don't focus on the other people first. You focus on yourself. You're always in your own mind. Yourself first. Then your family, then your immediate friends and people close to you, then your community, then that community, you could measure it a whole bunch of different ways, whether it's the Bitcoin community or the real estate community or what, and then but friends from that, a broader group of friends, and then your nation or your region or your nation. And why? And so what ends up happening when that self-preservation comes to us? If you look at any country where where you've destroyed this process, what does law look like in that process? And what people do is they'll do anything to survive. Yeah, they'll do anything to save their family. They'll do it. And so you have this breakdown of the societal contract, effectively because of our needs and wants, or of our own motivations in that.
Which, oddly enough, is like a vote of confidence in humanity. Depending on how you look at it, it's how resilient we are. We will do anything to survive. That's why we're still here, right? Yeah. That can lead to nefarious activities, but like at the end of the day, it speaks to our species' ability, our resilience, and anti-fragility.
Well, you used to have and this is in game theory, you'd get to a Schelling point. And a Schelling point is a point where nuclear weapons is a Schelling point. So
what is that? What is a Schelling point?
What it is game theory. It hits a point where if two people have nuclear weapons, then you don't press the button because it ends humanity.
Got it. Yeah.
So it gets to, because we compete for resources. We compete for resources, and no matter. Our competition takes us to that point. And so today, if you looked at the arms race, it's not around nuclear, it's about hypersonic weapons, it's about space weapons, it's about a whole bunch of other things. As global economies or regions try to compete for that. As they compete for it, what are they really doing? They're trying to say, our way of life is more important than the way that their way of life. So China has a different idea than the US, and China is doing the same thing to protect their way of life, the way of centralization and control, and this is the way we do it. But if you just look through the competition of humanity moving up, that's and why we will fall into the trap and say, and we'll protect our state, is a state will say, if they invade us, they'll take your real estate or they'll take your way of life. And so we'll fall into a trap and go to war and revolution and everything else to protect that. Now, that Schelling point around a competitive destruction on Bitcoin actually moves to the opposite side. So competition on Bitcoin, because it brings pricing down. It lets it brings energy pricing down. All energy is going to be priced in Bitcoin. I'm going to back off. I'm going to take just a tangent here. In 1971, the US dollar would have failed. Through the 70s, it would have failed. But instead of failing, when they went off gold, what they did is they co-opted through Saudi Arabia at first. Essentially, we will protect you with arms, and all oil globally will be priced in US dollars. And what that created is another run for the US dollars. It created essentially energy priced in US dollars. And all energy, and look at the nations that stepped out of that system and said, I'm not going to price oil in US dollars. They were excluded from the financial system of the world. Were invaded. And so you used a war machine to essentially price energy in US dollars. And when you did that, there was a benefit for US, there was a benefit for Canada, there was benefit for in that by pressing buttons, essentially manipulating money, you got free energy and nobody else did. And so it created, again, that competition created a powerful advantage. And how did you protect it? You protected it through, you had to defend that energy protection through a war machine to be able to keep shipping lines open and ensure people priced in US dollars.
Yeah.
Now you have energy sources that are more and more distributed, and they're changing faster. And Bitcoin mining is moving to volcanoes or geothermal and clean energy sources that are moving. So you have an energy change, and Bitcoin is incentivized to drive that change. Connecting the dots to that, what's happening that drives lower and lower cost. And it drives a competition to lower and lower costs that can't be manipulated. That makes sense? So you can't change the currency value. You can't create more units and hurt somebody else. Yeah. So because Bitcoin is fixed at 21 million in Bitcoin, there's 100 million Satoshis per Bitcoin. Yeah. Fixed at 21 million Bitcoin. And that change of fixing currency so you could never change it means that all of the technological gains get distributed broadly to society as prices fall. Okay. Why people can't see that is they're measuring their life in a different currency. But you can see it really clearly if you measure your life in Bitcoin. You can see my house fell by half this year. My house is
yes. Mine too.
And a whole bunch of other things have fallen by more this year. And but we're so used to that other contract. Now, taking back to the other thing I was talking about, that Schelling point, what that means is as people, now the early people on Bitcoin win more of the share. But by paving the road and actually ensuring that change is happening, that means all innovation that is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper naturally falls on that system. And as it falls lower and lower in price, then no matter who you are on the planet, even if you hate Bitcoin, you benefit from Bitcoin. because just like on your phone, you benefit from a flashlight on your phone and a camera on your phone and a calculator on your phone and a million apps on your phone that you don't pay for.
Mm-hmm.
They come with the phone because the marginal cost of production has fallen to a spot that there is no way for an entrepreneur to go in and create a new calculator app that can create a whole bunch of money.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And that same thing happens globally on everything as a result of this new economic standard that changes how we think about things. But it's very early. It's really early in that transition. And so people can't see it. People are still measuring a system from a system.
From a system that is going to fight tooth and nail to retain itself, as anybody in power does, right? Back to your, hope that this doesn't end in some kind of revolution or a war, but, who's going to give up their power seat willingly? I think about this. It's interesting to hear you talk about the importance of having a non-zero Bitcoin position, almost from the standpoint of like, that's the life raft, right? There's going to be a crazy storm over here. That's probably coming, right? And right now, I think that it's becoming more difficult for individuals to think for themselves because we are constantly bombarded with fear narratives, right? And in uncertainties. And humans, the last 18 months have been tough for everybody. Granted, I've probably had I'm in a smaller town, I've got a house, I'm in a good spot, all things considered. But when you remove certainty from the human brain, everything changes. Your base level anxiety skyrockets, right? When you don't know, if the store is going to be open in 2 months, if what life's going to look like in a month, that's very, very challenging for humans to just live and exist naturally. And so, but when you keep people on their heels, they're far less likely to think for themselves and think creatively, right? And that's what's occurring right now. And so, I think we're all more vulnerable to whatever narrative we're getting sold because we're in this fear scarcity mindset right now.
Yeah, and it's and that's actually why I challenge people that even if you didn't like Bitcoin, just to explore it, because what you might not realize is you're doing exactly what you think everybody else is, and you are too. And that fear paralyzes us, makes us terrible at decisions.
100%.
And so you have essentially corruption in money, and all money is an abstract concept of our time. So if you have construction, so people don't actually want more money. They want more of what they think money will get them.
Sure.
More experiences. Some people think if I have more money, I'll have more power over other people, or people will love me more. But they don't really want more units of money. What they want is what the feelings that they think money will get them. So it's an abstract concept for our time. And so if you manipulate that abstract concept and essentially destroy our time, and you must manipulate that concept more and more because the system demands it or it'll collapse. Credit-based system, you have to keep going. You have to have more and more and more manipulation all the time. Then essentially in a base contract of our life, everything revolves around that trade of our time. And if you have manipulation in it, you must have manipulation everywhere else. Corruption in money equals corruption everywhere else. But it keeps society in this fear-based mentality. And as they go into fear, they can't see options. Because it's easy for me to say this, living on the other side of this. In fact, one of the reasons I wrote the book is somebody that benefits from this system, technology, everything else, needs to be able to put these pieces together. Because it's arguably not going to be the person that's living on the street that's going to be able to see this and write a book about how they saw it. So it's somebody that has kind of an open mind and no fear about it at all. And so from that, you have different, you open more doors and you understand, okay, how could this look? And you can build a path to the other side. But there's if you're worried about, if you're working 2 jobs and you don't have a house and your rent just went up by 20%, and and you're worried about that, will you have that job in a year? How would you look at life? And if a politician came in and said, it's those people's fault over there, I'm going to give you more money, and I'm going to give you more money by robbing you more, by creating more, I'm going to print more money to give you more money, you'd believe them, and you'd live in that fear more and more and more. So that's what's happening today in society, unfortunately.
Yeah, and people want to find that enemy, right? Because inflation is not understood by most people as theft, which it is if you're on the losing side of that equation. You own the asset, you're benefiting. You don't own the asset, you're paying for it, right?
Right.
And that's why people wake up, look at the Monopoly board, and they're like, how did I end up back here? How are they so far ahead of me? And then they come to the conclusion, somebody must have cheated because we're all playing the same game.
Totally.
And then it's easy to point the finger, right? Because you're like, whose fault is it? Who did this to me, right?
Exactly. It's easier to blame. We don't blame systems. We blame people.
100%. Yes.
So, and this is a system problem, and everybody's looking for the person to blame.
Because we can understand people, right? Systems are complex.
Exactly. So people don't want to question this. So they want to look at the person. They say it's his, her fault. It's that politician's fault. It's this. It's a system dynamic problem. They can't. And that's actually why, going back to Bitcoin, you have to have a different system, a parallel system that is building to be able to change. You can't change this from the system. It has to be a different system. And there's no government. Try to think of, and Pierre's become a friend because he's read my book a bunch of times as well. But he'll talk about, and one of the things he'll talk about is inflation. He'll do a really good job talking about inflation. But
sorry, who is this?
Pierre Poilievre.
Okay.
But in that system change from inflation, he would not get elected by saying, I'm going to stop all printing, and we're going to have a deflationary collapse because of it.
No.
Because everything would fail. Every bank would fail. Everything would fail.
Yeah.
So, and so given that you can't stop printing, and printing ends in revolution, war, and a really ugly mess, and stopping printing ends in a deflationary collapse and a mess, then you must have a parallel system that can slowly transition from one system to another. And if you look at Bitcoin through that lens, and you look at the rate of growth of Bitcoin, it is growing faster than the internet. But it's the internet today. If you looked at Bitcoin growth, it's the internet in 1997. And so what came after 1997 on the internet, and how many people saw what the internet would become in 1997? I would say relatively few. And so that's how people are looking at Bitcoin right now. They're looking at through the lens of misunderstanding what's coming and projecting current forward instead of what's coming forward.
Okay, so there's some really important things in here. Number one, I'll just share, it doesn't matter really who I have on my show who's been in the game a long time and has credibility and a great track record. Just this morning, I was speaking with Felix Zulauf, but it doesn't matter, right? Everyone's coming to the same conclusion that we're in the end game here, right? And what happens next and how it happens, there's variables there. And no one knows with certainty. What Jeff is saying is exactly why. And here's what I want to communicate to people right now is that this doesn't mean you need to rush out, find a pile of money and get it into Bitcoin. That's not, you can do whatever you want, right? My strategy, and people, my audience knows this, has been I dollar cost average in, and I do without fail every 2 weeks. And I wasn't early to this game at all. I started 2 years ago investing in Bitcoin, right? And it was just an immaterial amount of cash every 2 weeks that I just pushed that direction. And now it's obviously with the appreciation, it's actually a much bigger percentage of my net worth than I anticipated it being, but didn't happen overnight, right? And it's something that I will need to continue for the next 10 years. That's my game plan. This is not a 2-year play, right? This is just part of the lifestyle now, and so it's there for me and it should be there for you. And it doesn't have to be intimidating, right? Whatever you can part with every 2 weeks or every month, maybe look at that as a way to enter if you haven't yet. Yeah. Yep. The second thing that you shared is that, the network effect. Well, you shared a bunch, but the second thing I want to touch on was you compared 1997, the dawn of the internet, and that's maybe where we're at in the adoption of crypto. Now, what's important about that is that a lot of people, I think, look at crypto as like, where can I get that big hit? What's the altcoin that's going to show me this rise? And people get lucky. There's nothing wrong with that. But, if you had just stuck with like 4 or 5 names in 1997, big internet companies, and hadn't looked at all the startups, you'd have retired incredibly wealthy today, just betting on Amazon, Google, et cetera, right? And so I guess where I'm going with this, Jeff, is like, it takes a lot of work to be good at the speculation. But if you're just sticking to the main assets, right, the steadfast major players, the infrastructure plays in the crypto world, that's why you talk about Bitcoin. That's why you don't talk about
Yeah, I haven't seen an altcoin that has the type of benefit both to society and to what we're talking about here, even if in money, that can match Bitcoin. Not even close. In a short term, lots. But if you think about, okay, we live in a system that must manipulate money. And what would that system look like from a stock market perspective? What would that system look like? And by the way, if you look back through history, you can see this. So when you manipulate money at this degree, what ends up happening is you create a population of everybody's trying to lever. They're trying to get out of that system. They don't know how. And if you looked at the network effect on altcoins and around NFTs, and okay, I'm going to sell my art, and I'm going to, and in this case, let's imagine I have 20 million. I'm one of the first in Ethereum. I have a $100 million wallet in Ethereum, and altcoins and NFTs is a really great way to get a whole bunch of people to buy. I could create another wallet, sell that to myself for 20 million. The whole world thinks, wow, these NFTs are selling for $20 million, and everybody races in and creates more and more of them, racing to, and then other coins come onto the market and say, oh, they're making money here. And the entire thing is caused by you're printing so much money and people are racing to a system to try to escape it, and gaming a system to try to escape it. All the while, and we won't be able to get into it in this depth in this talk, but Bitcoin was designed for security and decentralization. And by designing for security and centralization, it could be the ultimate apex predator to money itself. Governments can't stop it. They try to shut it down. It grows faster. There's no marketing department. There's nobody. People are spending their own time hardening it, making it hard, bringing more people onto it. That is growing like crazy as a store of value. Layer 2, which does not need to be optimized for security, to be optimized for speed. Lightning Network, and why El Salvador used Lightning Network, and now you can start paying for things in Bitcoin. And trade is opening up globally. Individuals can trade back and forth. I can send for 0.0002 cents. $100 million on Bitcoin to somebody in India right this second, and nobody can stop me. And so trade starts to emerge. One of my businesses in India took 3 weeks to wire a six-figure money, and it cost me a fortune to wire that money. I'm wondering where it is in that 3 weeks. I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah,
I can individually trade on this new network. And so that Lightning Network has a new network effect that's reinforcing on Bitcoin. And it's very early, but it's growing exponentially. I think the growth on Lightning Network is growing 4% a week. As more and more people embed on this system. So if I looked at all the altcoins, I don't see how you could solve this from those altcoins. I don't see anything in them that I would say that bet. Now, I want to connect a different piece to what you said. I think Bitcoin itself is like investing in the layer 1. It's like being able to invest not in Amazon. It's like being able to invest in TCP/IP. and all the value on top of it is being layer 2 and a whole bunch of companies.
And this is just, for context, basic internet protocol.
Basic internet protocol.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what essentially creative destruction has come from money itself.
Yeah.
And that protocol is like TCP/IP, and then there's another protocol there's another layer on top of it, Lightning, Liquid, a whole bunch of different layers that are adding more functionality onto the base protocol. So why a lot of people didn't see the internet coming is because in 1997 it would take 10 minutes to download a cat video.
Yeah.
And the thing that sped that up and created a whole bunch more value, and companies took advantage of it, was on top of that network. As the network evolved, more people brought to the network. So now compare the transition that society is going through, and you think about, and so people are worried about, okay, what if Bitcoin collapses the system and everything goes to Bitcoin today? I can't spend my money. How do I pay bills at grocery stores and everything else? And today that would be a valid concern. And that would be a valid concern, like in 1999, Amazon's only selling books and toys and a couple of things. And everybody knows, and if you held on to it at that time, you could have taken $5 and into, what is it today? What's the value today?
I have no idea. I don't trade those big stocks, but yeah.
But if you held it today, through that entire time, through lots of ups and downs, it would have gone from $5 to whatever the number is today. Very few people would have held it against that volatility.
$3,300 in 85.
$5 to $3,300. There's probably stock splits in there as well.
Yeah.
So you would have, but most people wouldn't have held it because they would have seen there's Walmart's better, Sears is better, all of these other things. There's no way this bookstore. They were measuring technology through a bookstore lens instead of what it would become. Now think about the transition for society. If all retail stores failed in 1999 and it was only Amazon selling books, where would you get your food? And so you would have societal collapse, and you would no place to buy your food. And so it couldn't so when I talk about a transition from one system to another, and the people who go first on that bridge and are building the transition, yes, they gain more wealth. But by paving the way by building that bridge, they're actually building the bridge to the other side, so all of society walks across the bridge. And so today, if Sears fails, when Sears failed, nobody had a problem.
They failed because nobody needed them.
Nobody needed them because Amazon offered more services and more people are shopping there.
Yeah,
and so that's what I suspect will happen between what currencies used to look like, or what they look like today, and the world we live in, the way they look like today, and where we're moving to in the future.
So, what do you make of? I have a couple more. Conscious of the clock here, but Raoul Pal is a friend of yours, been on my show a handful of times. He's shifted his focus to Ethereum largely by just comparing charts and saying this is okay. So what's going on there? What do you see?
So Raoul read my book. I think he read my book three times or 4 times, and he reached out every time. And you know what you said, you read it 2.5 times. But what I hear in that is every time I pick up new information in this book, and one of the things that Raoul picked up, and actually a lot of what framed his entire exponential where things are going, are as you know from my book, from talking to me, and so that frame of reference. I think the thing that, and I really like Raoul, but I think the thing we disagree on, because he's not a technologist. He's not, and the network effect on Ethereum, I don't think is a stable network effect. Because a network effect, what it has to do to be a stable network effect is it needs to grow more value for all participants. And it has to keep doing that. So Bitcoin has a network effect that does that. And the network effect that you see on Ethereum, that network effect essentially increases gas fees and increases why it keeps changing, why you have a foundation in the middle of it that says, trust us, we'll change it to whatever the market needs, instead of a protocol that doesn't have a foundation.
Yeah.
You're trusting people with everything built on top of it that have to change their mind because of the way the system is designed, and they have to keep changing their mind. And so it doesn't make the protocol for now. Well, and you can imagine how many companies come to me to help me with this NFT project, help me with this. And so I see the massive type of wealth that people are trying to build on there. Mm-hmm. And I can understand why it would look like a network effect. Just like when I lived through the 99 bubble, 2000 bubble in technology, everybody thought eyeballs was a network effect. I get more eyeballs, and the amount of money racing to that, it looked like that at the time, but it was really a Ponzi scheme. Now, out of that, there was a whole bunch of real value created of companies that were strong network effects, creating stronger and stronger with each additional user. But a lot went broke. When I look at a lot of the stuff in the altcoin world, I see experiments that must change. And then now think about if I own an NFT on top of one of those experiments that must change, or if my gas fees go up like crazy on essentially my tax to the system, they have to go up on there. What if protocol fails? What happens to my NFT that I just spent all that money for? Mm-hmm. And so through that lens, I think we just have a disagreement. He's looking at a rate of growth that is caused by manipulation of money and people trying to get in, get out really fast. And he's thinking that's a network effect.
Yes.
It's not a stable network effect.
Okay. I'm with you there. I'm following you. And that's the perspective, right? You come at it from the standpoint of a technology entrepreneur, Rel from the money management side, right? So it's different points of view.
Yeah, and I can understand how that tricks a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
And I actually haven't had this conversation with Rel, but I will.
You should. Yeah. I love it. Okay. Now I have to ask, because you mentioned, you're getting shown a lot in the NFT space. Now I'm now seeing suddenly a bunch of deal flow in the Metaverse space, right? And super, super vague business plans, obviously, because, fools rush in, right? So a couple questions for you, and you just let me know. Like, we run out of time here, Jeff. Just say, we're bumping up against the clock, and I'll cut it off because I'll probably keep you for 4 hours if you let me. But so, what are you seeing that has teeth? Are you seeing anything that has teeth? Are you engaged in any projects in the metaverse that you're excited about? Investors who are getting pitch deals right now, should they be just taking a hard pass, looking for specific business models, or what strikes you?
So I haven't seen anything in there that for me grabs my attention that could be a long-term source of value yet. I've seen lots. Okay. But like you said, that's not to say that they're not that there's nothing there. It's just I haven't seen it yet, and so there's a lot of hype in this space.
Yeah,
and when there's hype, people can make a lot of money. And while there's hype, it's just you need to know when to get it in and get out. I'm typically not an investor in things like that. I need to believe in the underlying fundamentals that drive a real business over time. So I'm not typically a short term. I'm not a trader.
Yes,
and so I haven't seen anything yet that it would be worth my time or money investing in.
Okay. And you haven't seen anything that's caught your attention, but are there any ideas in your mind that but if somebody were to do this, in my brain, that makes sense?
Oh, like thousands.
Okay.
My brain's on fire. There's so many different opportunities, because if you think about the protocol layer, Bitcoin specifically, that is, and then Lightning layer 2, if you think about some of the things that are happening, technology changes the rules, and we don't notice it happening, essentially because it takes a monopoly and the monopoly favors very few, and it crushes it by reducing the cost base. like by an order of magnitude. Let's call it a 10 times reduction in cost base or 10 times value difference. So if you looked at, okay, say Lightning Network and say the cost base to be able to transfer money around the world, it has to go through this credit-based system, bank to bank to bank, and all of the people in between there. And now you have a system that's one-to-one that takes that cost base and eradicates it. You could see through that lens why it might be, why the people that are benefit the most from that monopoly, including us in first world nations, wouldn't see the technology because we use Visa, it's easy, we could go down the street, but in El Salvador, when that same transaction costs them 20%, it's not easy. And people are unbanked, and we're all around the world where they're unbanked. So where do you think a technology like that would be embedded first? And so what's happening that is being embedded all across the globe at that level. Now, if I'm a business and I'm paying a bit, most businesses pay at least 2.5% to Visa just to be able to take money, and I can add Lightning Network and I can take money for 0%. What might I do? And then if I do that, and then on top, and then I can give my customers more value to pay in Bitcoin, what might they do? And so you start to emerge. Now, in my book, I talked about how these monopolies are constructed from a network effect design. Use YouTube as an example.
Sure.
So YouTube is, you create a way to track content. And the content creation out of that, so more and more people create content, which you put advertising on top of, and you give the content producers 1% of that revenue, 0.5% of the revenue.
Right.
The more content producers, the more users find them because they're all finding unique content. And it goes on forever. And the content producers, the bar keeps going up higher and higher because most of the content never gets seen.
Yeah.
And so they're a lot of times they're more and more radical, and they're spending more and more on the platform to be able to try to get seen, to be able to get that take rate of the 1%.
Yeah.
And to be able to monetize that whole structure, you have to have advertisers that are coming in and funding that, and most of the advertising revenue goes to YouTube.
Yes.
On Lightning Network, you could do the exact same thing, collapse that entire network, and if content producers are the ones that get value anyways, you could redistribute the rules, and you could say, instead of giving 1%, we do need to operate a business, we need to be profitable, but we're going to give you 90% of the revenue that you make forever. And we're going to make this. And then where would content producers start to move to?
That 90%.
As content producers started to make more money from that system, more user, it would drive a network effect. More people would come in to see content producers and find other content producers. And you could rebuild on a different structure, different foundation, the entire thing we see today at a way lower cost structure that empowers content providers. Artists, same thing. So you're going to see a disruption again of countless businesses that can't compete on the old rails that were designed around the old rails and had to be inefficient on those old rails. There's going to move to new rails on Bitcoin.
Okay. So, because I've been trying to wrap my mind around, and I've explored like Decentralized, create a little account there, walk around, see what's going on in here.
Can we pause for 1 second? I'm just going to send a note and go. We can go 15 minutes longer if I send a note.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay,
cool. We're back.
All
right. So yeah, I've been trying to wrap my mind around like what the use case for the metaverse is, because tons of hype, everybody's talking about it, yada yada yada. I get excited. I want to know what's going on here. I hopped into Decentralized, walked around a little bit. And the ideas that I hear now are like, oh, well, wouldn't it be neat? Like, this is the next generation of what you and I are doing, right? Instead of you and I doing this on Zoom, we could be in a room doing it together. And in theory, that sounds kind of cool, but I'm like, that's not it. That's just not it. Would I rather sit in a virtual room with your avatar, then do this. Like, I don't know if I would, what's the advantage there, right? But that's like the obvious low hanging fruit. Oh, here's what it could do. Like, I get that's what it could do, but that's not what it's going to do. That's not what's going to change the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. And some of that will, if you think about this interaction, it's kind of a 2D interaction, that will make it way more powerful. It'll feel real. You attach what's happening in the gaming world to that, and it will provide a whole bunch more value that we can't actually even see today. So right. there are businesses in there, and there's some virtual reality, what's coming in virtual reality, which may replace how we think about our phone and integrate to so there's tons of stuff coming into that space. It's just I haven't seen something today that offsets. My bar is pretty high for an investment today because I'm measuring everything against Bitcoin. And so it has to. I have to see a rate of return and adjusted for the risk of everything else, and realize that some of these will go to zero. It would exceed that, and so my bar is pretty high.
When you say you measure it against Bitcoin, do you mean to say that it's got to compete with Bitcoin as a place for your capital?
Yeah.
Important to okay. Yeah. So what do you make of these real estate deals and super yachts that are being sold in the metaverse? Is this just crazy speculation? Normal part of any frothy cycle. It's got to happen, right?
100%.
It's just got to happen.
It's got to happen as part of a cycle. So one of the companies that I'm involved in, I don't know if you know this, Addy.
Of course. Yeah, it's fractional real estate investing.
What it effectively creates is the realverse, right? Because those real estate plays are actually being. If you see what people should sign up for their app that's coming up out in, it's coming out shortly. It's incredible. You get a rate of return. But you're connecting real economic value. And you're allowing anybody to participate in that real economic value, and you can play with this game kind of on your phone. So that's a really powerful business model.
And do I have that right? Is that fractional real estate investing? Is that the
So essentially, you reduce the cost structure of real estate investing, so people could invest. Nobody invests $1, but you could invest as little as $1 into a real estate project that. Normally, it would take millions of dollars to be able to invest in that real estate project, and most people were locked out of it. Yeah. So what the company did is, through technology, took down the cost to be able to do that. And same thing that's happening. A whole bunch of LP or GPs are racing in to Addy because Addy has so much money to be able to deliver to these, through offering the advantage to individuals, through offering to people who were disadvantaged before, and so it creates a way to get into real estate. And what I like about that is, it's most people, when they're in real estate, they're all into one thing. They're leveraged. So this provides natural diversity. I think there's going to be 40 odd properties launched this year. So people are getting returns. People are getting quarterly dividends out of real estate that they're buying onto this app. It's all into their app and wallet. It's really powerful.
Interesting. I have to ask though, Jeff, how do you hold that against your deflation thesis?
So I actually love that you asked. I suspect, so I know where the market's going, but I suspect governments aren't going to allow it to go there. And so there's a whole bunch of people that are getting worse and worse and worse out of this. And this system allows those people to participate in real estate. That's it. I still and those people are seeing this participation in a different way than they ever could before. So I still think if you fast forward where this goes, Bitcoin has to be a part of the portfolio, and over time you'll see deflation. But governments can't stop printing money; they're going to keep doing it.
They're going to keep doing it,
and so this is a way for a bunch of people to get yield. They can make income from a system like this, and mitigate their risk from being all into one thing.
Yeah, without having to find access to $1 million to buy a home.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, they can get a horse in the race. So it's democratizing home ownership.
Exactly.
Essentially. Okay, very cool. All right. Look, I want to talk to you about something completely different, and that's writing your book. So for anybody watching this, we're pivoting now to a very personal interest of mine. I'm using the next 12 minutes that we got here very selfishly. So I author a weekly newsletter, Jeff, and it's one of my favorite things that I do, right? I essentially have conversations like this with people like you. I get to sit on my takeaways, debrief on my notes, and then I spit out an article once a week to my audience and just share like what this got me thinking about. Sometimes it's my biggest lessons. Sometimes it just like adds fuel to a thought already in my brain. And it's like an op-ed that I share every week, and I love writing it, right?
Love that.
And so I'm writing an ebook right now, and it's more or less done. I figured it'd be like a good trial to see what the project of authoring a proper book would be, right? Time investment, the editing process, all this stuff. And it's, a 23-page book. Once I'm done editing, maybe it'll be 19 pages. I usually cut things back, right? Maybe less. So, for some reason on my, I've got my 1-page plans for life, 10-year goals, 3-year goals, all this stuff. For some reason, a really important goal of mine is to author a book. I just love the idea of authoring a formal book. And I feel like, as I go through this business that I run now, having conversations for a living, I get more excited about various ideas that I want to share my perspective on. You are an author before you wrote The Price of Tomorrow, right? You were an entrepreneur, right? So, I've got a million questions for you, but talk to me, Jeff. I'm considering this endeavor. Should I consider it, right? If I go forward, what should I be? Yeah, please.
So a big part of it is the why, and do you have a compelling message that is different? Is it about you, or is it about the message? And so for me, in that, I didn't want to write a book for 10 years. I've been talking about what I wrote in that book, but nobody, it just wasn't being listened. I could not believe that the world wasn't seeing this. And where the world would go if they didn't see it. So I really didn't want to write a book. I felt compelled to write a book, and had to. It took about a year. It was a process that it was an entrepreneurial process. I knew nothing about writing a book. So what do you do? You investigate. I'm curious. When I don't know something, so I investigated everything about writing a book. I made a bunch of mistakes. I first hired a ghostwriter. It was terrible. I paid a whole bunch of money to end that and use nothing. So that it was a false start. Then because I didn't realize how much time it would take and how much brain time it would take, investigation time, and everything else. I would wake up in the middle of the night. I would write a paragraph. I would sit for 4 hours sometimes, and I'd get nothing out, because I was also building 3, 4, 5 different businesses at the same time too. But it had to come out. It was very much an entrepreneurial process. Now, today, fast forward to what happened. And I didn't even know this, but the amount of books it sold is staggering. How many global sales it's had? It's in the top 500 of 12 million books on Amazon. Of 12 million books, most authors get 230 sales, and if you just do that long tail, it looks like artists, but things that really grab attention, that get people talking about something else, can, I guess, just have a way of unfolding. Now, I would say even in that book, had COVID not happened and the acceleration of money printing, maybe my book would have been not seen. But I didn't write it to get seen. I wrote it because this had to come out. It had to come out. This is lessons learned on it. The stuff you write, maybe you're way better than me because you do it. But the stuff I wrote that I thought was exceptional, I would look back at a month later and go, this is terrible. I cannot believe I wrote this and I thought it was good. So the process, I just kept on iterating. And then in hiring great editors is a key. Really great editors, because specifically for my book, I had to keep it simple enough. It was really complex topic. And and instead of going all the way down the rabbit hole on all of these different pieces, I had to weave a theme together over top of and touch the tops of the waves to see what was really like. Because it's a system change book.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was hard.
No kidding.
So hiring really great editors who could be honest with me and say, this just you got to cut this whole thing and turn it into something else. That really helped with that process.
Well, if I go down this path, they might hit you up for an intro there then.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's probably the best thing about writing a book that I totally discounted is how much I learned through the process.
Yeah.
And then what ended up happening, because to put your words into that thought, you have to get to a point that you can easily explain something. And then more so by writing the book, what it did to the amount of people racing to me, that I learned at an even greater rate. So most of the learning came as a result of writing the book.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that was a huge unknown benefit that I actually cannot believe. I can't believe the types of people that what I get to do today and what I've learned and the people I meet every day as a result of writing that book. I can't believe it.
I can believe it. I mean, because I was such a fan of your book and know how much traction it got. Those numbers on Amazon are phenomenal. You know, it does two things, what you shared. It reinforces my conviction to write a book and simultaneously sort of puts it on blast a little bit, because first of all, I'm the biggest benefactor of my YouTube channel. I'm the biggest benefactor of my podcast. I'm the biggest benefactor of my newsletter for exactly the reasons you just discussed. I learn the most because I have to create the content. I get to have conversations with people like you and then regurgitate it in my own words from my newsletter. And I learn the most and my network grows the most. And therefore, you know, it kind of like self-perpetuates into a greater and greater thing. That's what makes me so curious about the takeaway from authoring a book and, you know, the driver behind like the why, because you said, you know, don't do it for you, do it if you know why. And that's where I was like, does it put my conviction on blast because I feel like I want to do this because I love to write and I love to communicate? Simultaneously, I feel very troubled. And like a lot of the motivation behind the content I create is that we are suffering from some mass inability to debate. And I'm seeing this through all the communities that surround me. And I find myself often with very close friends these days, kind of censoring maybe what I want to share because we've become, and I hang out with a pretty libertarian, like hard charging entrepreneur crowd, yet like more and more frequently, there's concepts that are just off the table if they oppose the common viewpoint. And what's lost on people is that like, if you and I debate a topic and you just smash me and disprove everything I think, I'm the winner there, aren't I?
Totally,
because
totally.
I just learned, right? Like I identified my blind spots. I grew out of this, right?
And a lot of people don't debate in a way to do that. They look to smash their person. And here's something that will help anybody listening to this. What somebody says about you, about your idea and everything else, it's not that thing that hurts. It's the thing that, because you either they made you smarter and they were right. They're an idiot. And then why would you care? Why would you care? Or they're just trying to bait you, and why would you care? So if you just look at all those reactions, I actually don't know. You can imagine what I see on Twitter, and so most of it's unbelievable, or comments on that. You can imagine what I see on that from a minority of people trying to get. But again, nothing can hurt me except for my feelings of it. And most of that is we lash back because of our own ego. trying to say, no, we're this person. And it's a useless waste of time, because if the idea has merit, then the idea has merit, and then you lean in. Mm-hmm. It's not about you, but everybody makes it about them.
Yes, because right or wrong, that idea is not your identity. The same as politics are not your identity.
Not your identity.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. And okay, so I know you're out of time. I'll stop. We'll cap it here. Jeff,
we'll do it again soon. Yeah, I love spending the time with you, Jay.
Awesome. Likewise, man. Okay, have an awesome day, and I can't wait to do this again. All right. Okay, guys, 3 last things. First, if you enjoy my interviews and would like a bit more, you can subscribe to my Friday newsletter. It's free, and the comment to subscribe is right beneath this video in that pinned comment. In this newsletter, I share my key lessons learned, takeaways, and any actions that I might be taking in the market as a consequence of what I've learned on the show. Second, when I started a YouTube channel, I never anticipated generating any advertising revenue. But coincidentally, I do now, which is awesome. And so what I've decided to do is donate this to an organization that is very close to my heart called Zero Ceiling. Their mission is to end youth homelessness. The way they do this is by providing young people experiencing homelessness with supportive housing, employment, professional support, life skills, and outdoor adventure. Because often young people in urban centers with no resources will never get the opportunity to experience wild places, nature that can be so transformational, and absolutely was for me. Third, if you prefer to listen to my content, you can now find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for The Jay Martin Show.